Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today you're checking out a brand new Magicka Warden solo PVE build for the Elder Scrolls Online, and this is updated for the Wrathstone DLC. Now, I've done a few solo builds on my channel in the past, and I have to say that this new Warden build is probably the easiest and maybe even the strongest out of all of those so far. So whether you want to take on some world bosses by yourself, maybe solo a dungeon, even a vet dungeon for monster helms, this build can do it all. And on top of that, it's just really simple and fun to play, an easy rotation, and very quick to get into. So we'll start by going over your basic stats, the gear sets, skills, champion points, and more coming up next. Alright, let's check out the stats on the build first. Usual disclaimer though, I'm not completely min-maxed on this build yet. Your stats will definitely increase with gold gear, for example, gold glyphs. If you happen to have Undaunted maxed out, which I don't have on this character yet, your stats can definitely go up. But as a baseline, we're looking at about 34k max Magicka, 25k health. That'll bump up actually to about 27k with our Warden passives, 18k max stamina. The recoveries do go up with our potion here. So about 2k Magicka recovery, 800 or so stamina recovery. That does go up a bit with one of our buffs. For the spell damage, since this is a Magicka Warden, you're sitting at about around 1700 spell damage. This can go up depending on your weapon trait. If you have Nirnhoned, it will go up higher. But honestly, the spell damage is not super important because we're relying on a few proc sets to pump out damage on this build. For our resistances, we are in heavy armor, 5 pieces of heavy, sitting at about 25k spell resistance and physical resistance. For our attributes, 64 points into max Magicka here, getting a nice big Magicka pool. For the food, I'm using tri-stat food, very important on the build. I am using the ATRONACH Mundus Stone, that's for a little bit extra Magicka recovery. I am a stage 4 vampire. I think that's probably optional. The extra recoveries do help a little bit, as well as the undeath passive is nice for tanking beefier targets, hard-hitting targets. You'll get that extra damage reduction. As far as the potions here, I think I mentioned it. Tri-stat potions are going to be ideal for some tougher solo fights, boss fights, things like that, where you're using all your pools. All your stat pools. You can also run just the basic Magicka pools for trash fights, and that works just as well. For the race here, very important, I went with Argonian, and I think Argonian's going to be best in slot for this type of solo Magicka build because we have increased healing done, which is very helpful. We have a good buff to max health, max Magicka, and then we have this nice resourceful potion passive where you get 4k health, Magicka, and stamina back every time you chug a potion. So that on top of a tri-pot, you're getting something like 10k resources back every 45 seconds. So very helpful on this build. Other races that would be fairly good, probably Breton, High Elf, even Dark Elf, those would all be good. But I just like Argonian for this setup. It works really well. All right, I think that covers the basic stats, so let's jump into the gear next, which is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. So let me start with our heavy armor set. This is new in the Wrathstone DLC. I'm using the Frozen Watcher set. We'll check out the stats here. So we've got a max stam bonus, max health, max stamina again, and for the 5-piece, summon a blizzard while blocking, which deals about 1400 frost damage every 1 second. It also has a chance of inflicting chilled, which is basically minor maim on your surrounding enemies. So this set is pretty cool. Basically, you get a damage AoE effect while blocking. It kind of looks like this. It has a pretty big radius, and it's doing decent damage, over 1k damage per second. It is basically a proc set, so things like your max Magicka, your spell damage are actually not going to buff this. The only way that you can buff this is with certain passives and buffs. As a Warden, we have a bonus to ice damage. So we have increased frost damage by 6%. That's going to buff our Frozen Watcher set. We also have Minor Berserk from one of our passives here. That's going to buff the set by another 8%. Then things like your champion points, as far as buffing elemental damage, will buff this as well. So I think it starts off at about 1,000 damage per second, and I've got it buffed up to about 1,400. You can probably push it a little bit higher than this, but that's about the best that you'll get. So overall, this is a pretty interesting set. It's a fun mechanic for like a tank build or a permablock build, which this kind of ends up being. You're basically blocking and doing damage at the same time. So it's also really effective for solo play as well. So I've got 5 pieces of that set on the body. So heavy chest, waist, hands, legs, and feet. I don't have the best traits with this. Obviously, it takes a little bit of time to farm this. It is a dungeon set from the depths of Minotaur, one of the new dungeons. As far as your best in slot traits, I'm going to say probably 2 infused on your heavy pieces, infused chest, infused legs, and then sturdy on the other pieces, because we are going to be doing quite a bit of blocking. For my next 5-piece set, I went with spinners. So if you're not familiar with the spinner set, what it does is it gives you a nice bonus to max Magicka here, 2 bonuses, a nice spell damage bonus, and then it adds an extra 3k spell penetration to your build. In heavy armor, we don't have any extra spell penetration other than like champion points. So this helps boost that stat for us. It also helps our Frozen Watcher set hit for more damage. So I think this is a nice synergy as far as running this with Frozen Watcher. So on my front bar, sword and shield, I'm using a decisive axe. The weapon doesn't really matter. You can use any weapon. I do like decisive for the extra ultimate gain. If you have transmute stones, another nice trait here would be Nirnhoned. You'll get a little bit of extra spell damage, helping your abilities hit harder. Offhand shield, your best trait probably is going to be sturdy. Reinforced would be decent as well. On your back bar, you definitely want an ice staff, and if you can get it infused is going to be the best trait there. The reason why is you can run an absorb Magicka glyph on your back bar infused and get Magicka back every 2 seconds. So that's about 400 Magicka recovery equivalent on your stat sheet. This is going to be really helpful for just sustaining your build in long fights. The reason why we went with Ice Staff is we actually get some defensive passives here when blocking on our back bar. So in the Destruction Staff skill line, you have the Ancient Knowledge passive where equipping a Frost Staff reduces your block cost by 36% and increases your damage absorption while blocking. Basically what that means is you can block on your front bar and use your stamina pool, bar swap, block on your back bar and use up your Magicka pool. So in very intense fights where you have lots of AoE damage, lots of multiple targets hitting you, even though we are built for defense, you're going to run out of stam fairly quickly. And then if you do run out of stam, you can always switch to your back bar and use some Magicka and then switch back. That covers the weapons. Then we just have jewelry pieces here. So spinner's neck and 2 rings. What I would recommend is 2 recovery glyphs and 1 spell damage there on the jewelry. All arcane. You can run some infused or bloodthirsty. That will help a little bit with your damage output. That'd be a nice option as well. Last but not least, our monster set. I went with Ice Heart here for a few reasons. The 1 piece is not bad. You get the extra spell crit bonus, which is nice on a Magicka Warden. What I really like, though, is the 2-piece bonus here. When you deal critical damage, you have a chance for basically a 10k damage shield for 6 seconds, and the effect can occur every 6 seconds. You also do about 1k frost damage as well. Now, Ice Heart is definitely best in slot for this type of build. Obviously, it does the passive damage, the 1k damage per tick there. But also the damage shield is very helpful when soloing. I actually use this on my Magicka Templar solo build, and it's very strong. Unlike most of the damage shields that got nerfed in the Murkmire patch, this doesn't have a cap to how high this damage shield can go. I believe the base is something like 8k damage, and then with champion points, you're able to get this close to 10k on your shield, and it's not capped by your health. So 10k, even if you have a low amount of health, you can still get a 10k damage shield on this with the right champion points. So it's really nice on the solo setup. Again, you don't have to do anything to proc it, just do damage with AoEs like you normally would on a Warden. And you'll get that nice damage shield every 6 seconds, helping you stay alive and do damage at the same time. It's awesome. I love this set. So for this, since we are in 5 heavy, you could do 1 light, 1 medium, or even two light here to get the extra cost reduction from light armor, or 511 if you want the extra stats from the Undaunted passives. Either way would be good. All right, so let's check out the skills that are making it work. So if I had to describe this build, I would say it's sort of like a tank build. In fact, you could probably even be a group tank for vet dungeons with this, with a couple of skill changes. But the basic idea is we're blocking a lot, we're absorbing a lot of damage, and then pushing out damage through AoEs and through some of our proc sets, which you just saw. So first ability here on our sword and shield bar is going to be Absorb Magic. And this is mostly for the passives here. You can see down below, with this ability slotted, the amount of damage you can block is increased by 8%, and the cost of blocking is reduced by another 8%. So this is very helpful for sustaining our stamina when we're blocking on the front bar. You don't even have to cast the ability. Just have it slotted. You'll get that extra block cost reduction, 8%. That with your sturdy traits, with your block cost reduction from champion points, sustaining stamina on this build is no problem at all. This actually does a nice heal from your stamina pool. You can see 14k damage absorption on the shield, and then 16% of your max health you get healed back if you decide to actually use the ability. And that's against any projectile that's cast at you. So a nice bit of healing there for emergencies too if you need it. Next up, Deep Fissure. This is going to be our AoE spammable. It does have a 3-second timer, but it does a nice bit of damage basically in a column in front of you. And then another reason why I really like it on this build is we get the Major Breach, basically a big spell resistance reduction. 5k spell resist being taken away from an AoE in front of us. So this is going to make our Frozen Watcher hit harder. It's going to make our Ice Heart hit harder. All of our AoEs will hit harder. So you want to open a fight with this to proc that debuff and then get your AoEs going for even more damage. Next up is Leeching Vines. This is just a really nice self-heal. It does multiple heals actually. So what we've got here is the vines heal you for 1700 health each time they take damage. So basically almost 2k health per second when you're getting hit. And then the vine itself actually applies minor lifesteal to any enemy that's damaging you. So if you're getting hit by 10 enemies, they will all get debuffed with minor lifesteal. And what that does is it heals you for an extra 600 health every 1 second when you're damaging that enemy. Basically, if you're damaging them with an AoE ability, which we have tons of on this build, you're getting 600 health back every second. It's healing you for even more passively. So it's basically a passive heal, really nice to go along with our damage shield from Ice Heart, with our extra block mitigation since we're blocking most of the time. It's basically enough to keep our health maxed out in most cases. Inner Light, this just gives us our spell critical buff on the front bar, also an extra 5% max magicka is really nice. If you have your Mage Guild passives maxed out, you'll actually pump that up to 7% and an extra 2% magicka recovery. So this is really nice to have on the front bar. We're not going to cast it. Again, it's just for passives. Next up, Bird of Prey. This is sort of a flex spot for the majority of dungeon trash, easier dungeons. I will put Bird of Prey here for the extra damage that it does. Minor Berserk, 8%. And then also from our animal companions as a warden, let's see here. Advanced Species gives you an extra 3% damage for each of those abilities slotted. So we're getting basically 11% damage 8% for Minor Berserk, 3% for Animal Companions by having this slotted. So it's really good. Gives you a nice bit of movement speed too when you're moving around a dungeon. But again, it's mostly for the passive buff to our damage. Now, if you're in a really challenging fight, what I would recommend is slotting a Magicka-based heal, a burst heal in the spot. And in that case, we're going to slot Enchanted Growth. This gives us a nice burst of healing, gives us some extra recoveries as well. So some fights, you just have really hard-hitting bosses who are, hitting you with multiple attacks, and you need a burst heal, an emergency heal. For those type of situations, I definitely would recommend having that skill slotted, but in most cases, Bird of Prey is going to be fine. Then for our ultimate here, I went with Northern Storm. Northern Storm does a decent amount of damage, but really good for soloing because you get major protection, which is 30% damage reduction, on top of, your blocking already, all the damage reduction you get for that. So you're basically unkillable when this ultimate is going. You also get the nice boost to max Magicka here. 8% is a lot. It ends up being a lot on a Magicka Warden. So this is definitely your best in slot front bar ultimate, since we're spending most of our time here on the front bar. This will increase all of your damage. Starting on our back bar, this is our infused ice staff bar. I went with Fetcher Infection here as my first ability. This is a pretty decent damage over time. You can see every second cast, you also get a 50% boost, so that'll be like 22k Magicka damage over 10 seconds every second cast, so it's not bad. I basically will reserve this for higher health mobs in trash packs, and then definitely for a boss fight. Put this in our rotation to do some extra damage over time. It's really helpful. Next up, Blockade of Frost. This does some nice AoE damage over time. Can also proc Chilled. And remember, since this is infused, this is giving us that nice 400 Magicka recovery from our infused Absorb Magicka glyph. So that's one of the other nice things about this ability. So if you have that glyph, it'll proc every 2 seconds, giving you that nice Magicka recovery. Next up, Winter's Revenge gives you even more damage, slightly more than Blockade of Frost. Also AoE, also snares. Just does a lot of good damage over time. So we've got a lot of AoE here. We've got, Blockade. We've got our shards. And then while you're blocking, you have your Frozen Watcher going. And then you're just going to spam shocks there to get the spell pen. And then last year, we just have our 2 buffs. So one of the interesting things you can do, and probably why Magicka Warden is one of the best classes to run Frozen Watcher on for a kind of a block build setup like this, is Bullnetch. You get 4,800 stamina over 24 seconds. And then just to explain this a little bit more, while you are blocking, or your stamina recovery is stopped. So you can see there, I'm not regening any stamina. I'm stuck at this point. But if I have my Bullnetch going, then that actually doesn't count as stamina recovery. It's just a buff that you'll get back no matter what. So I can block, use up my stamina, have my stamina regen stopped, and still get stamina back through this buff. So really helpful to have. It's really what makes this build work and why Magicka Warden is probably the best to use this particular setup. So yeah, definitely a must-have. If you have the Magicka Morph, you'll definitely want to change to Bullnetch for this type of build, or for any tank Warden build in general, probably. Then our resistance buff is going to be Ice Fortress on the back bar. You get that nice major ward, major resolve, but not only that, you're getting minor protection, so an extra 8% damage reduction on top of what we already have from blocking, from our damage shields and all that good stuff. So very helpful. And then for our back bar ultimate, you can do different things here. You could put Healing Thicket, trees, the Warden trees. If you want to run that on the back bar, you definitely could for some extra healing. If I'm at full ultimate, then I do just like Elemental Rage because it does a lot more damage than our Northern Storm. So I will use that once in a while just to pump out some extra damage on the boss or something like that to open up a fight. Then I do like this ultimate there. Alright, so that covers skills. Let me just explain the rotation here kind of quickly. So obviously you will want to make sure your buffs are up, your netch and your armor buff. And then for a trash pull, you're just going to lay down your 2 dots, your wall, and then your shards, bar swap, and then you're going to hold down block to proc Frozen Watcher, and then basically just watch everything die around you. So let's see how that works. So buffs, my dots, I'm just going to do 1 here. So once we bar swap, the last thing you want to do is hit shocks. That's going to proc our debuff there, and then just bar swap back, recast your AoEs, and they're dead. Let me do that again. So AoEs, bar swap, block into our shocks. If you need healing, go ahead and pop your vines. That'll heal you back up to full. You'll have your ultimate. Go ahead and cast that if you need it. And then, like I said, just bar swap back. AoEs. Make sure your buffs are up at all times. That's probably the most important thing, is making sure, especially that netch is up, because that's going to keep your stamina topped off. And yeah, that's about it. Use your potion if you need it, and you're good to go. Okay, last but not least, let's check out the champion points on this build. Champion points are definitely very important for any kind of solo build. This is for 810, which is the current CP cap. But this would work with a lower amount of CP, and I'll try to mention kind of the best nodes that you want to focus on. So in the green tree, 37 Warlord, 19 into Sprinter, 75 Arcanist, 43 into Mooncalf. You definitely want to pump up your Magicka recovery first as much as possible. Stamina recovery honestly is not super important because, like I mentioned, your stamina recovery is shut off while blocking, and you're really going to get that from the bull netch anyways, so pump up Arcanist first. The other one that you want to pump up here is going to be Shadow Ward. 72 is going to give us 23% block cost reduction, so definitely focus again on Shadow Ward, helping you block as much as possible. And then 23 just left over into Tumbling for roll dodge. In the blue tree here, pretty spread out. 27 into Blast for healing, 23 into Elfborn for those crits, 64 Elemental Expert. This is pumping up both Ice Heart's damage and Frozen Watcher because we get that extra elemental damage. You can see an extra 13% Frost damage. So that's buffing both of those sets. So this is an important node to hit first. Spell Erosion is helpful as well. You can see I have almost 5k spell penetration there. I tried to match the passive for light armor, which I think is like 4.4k, or maybe it's 4,800 spell penetration. So since we're heavy armor, we are running spinners, and we do have the debuff from shocks, but this kind of just completes it, letting us hit for almost full damage, almost full penetration, thanks to CP. So definitely these two nodes, I would hit those first. Master at Arms is just going to buff our shocks, so it's not super important, but you can put some here. 34 is what I have. 56 in Thaumaturge. This is more important because you have 2 backbar AoEs that you're running, so this is going to buff that by 20%, so that's pretty important. And then the red tree here, 51 into Ironclad, 10 into Spell Shield, just some extra resistances here since we're not capped. 43 into Hardy and Elemental Defender, 34 into Thick Skinned, 23 Quick Recovery, 10 Heavy Armor Focus, and then also very important if you're using Ice Heart, which I mentioned earlier, is you want to pump up points into Bastion here. 56 points is going to give us a 20% increase on our damage shield from Ice Heart. So that went from about 8k up to basically a 10k damage shield, putting just 56 points here. So that's very helpful. Definitely hit that if you can. All right, everybody, that's going to about wrap it up for this Magicka Warden solo PvE build. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please hit that like button, leave a comment below. It really does help out the channel. If you're interested in checking out more solo builds for the game, I do have quite a few more builds like this on my channel, so I'll try to leave links for those in the description below. Make sure you check those out. And if you like these videos and you're not a subscriber yet, why the heck not? It is free, and I put out new build videos just like this one every single week. So until then, thank you all very much for watching. I appreciate all of you, and I'll see you around in the next video. Thanks.